what told she said.
You learned from your grandma?
ANN PETTWAY, the best.
Best teachers, the grandma? But this, sitting around the frame like this and quilting on each other's quilts is the most old-fashioned thing, right? Because all the modern quilters, they feel like nobody wants to take the time to quilt on somebody else's quilt, you know what I mean? And so that's what I like best about coming here is that it's just this, just sitting around the frame and quilting.
You ain't too, Joe. I'm enjoying. Oh, no, I do.
It don't take patience.
Quilting on your hand look better to me than quilting with the machine. See, a machine, you can do that anytime, but you have to take time and do it real well with your hand.
Men in quilts are guests. It's totally a woman's world. It's very kind of women to allow us to do this.
Steal away to Jesus. To me, it's like medicine. It's, you know, I saw what I was writing, said, but you won't know it if I don't tell you. Because, see, I can just be quilting, and I don't have a pain in the world. I would sit there and sometimes I would sing to myself or sing out a little loud. My Lord, He's calling by the thunder, the trumpet sound within my soul.
Gee'S Bend is a location in central Alabama. It's a bend in the Alabama River. It has no bridge across it, so it's very isolated. It's about 45 or so miles west of Selma. Originally, it was a plantation with slaves. After the Civil War, the slaves stayed on as sharecroppers, and it was a very poor, very isolated community where people raised their own food and made their own quilts.
This was your learning quilt.
Right. This is the first little thin jacket I made.
And what do you call the pattern?
Robin Peter the Paper. And it had a field cotton and everything. I started making quilts when I was 14 years old. I was with my mother and she taught me how to make them. And it was fun to me. I did it all the time. I'm 82 years old yet and still doing quilts.
Some of this fabric, Ely and Walker printed it for 125 years. And so you got some of that Ely and Walker in there.
Well, it came from the quilting bee.
From the quilting bee.
In the 1960s, people associated with Sears and Roebuck and Bloomingdale's from New York thought it would be a great thing to have these quilt makers make quilts for the New York market. And they then created the Freedom Quilting Bee.
We were just making quilts to keep our family warm. And when the Freedom Quilting Bee came about, they began to make quilts to sell.
It provided jobs for women in Gee'S Bend to make quilts to order.
They was making pillows and, you know, pillowcases. But, you know, when they was doing quilts there, they had to make sure they got the stitches to exact point.
Because when we were working on quilts, you know, we always made the little small stitches and you couldn't see them. But people want to see the stitches in the quilt now. They get to the quilt and can't see the stitches. They say, we need to see the stitches.
This building we're in, this is the Gee'S Bend Quilter Collective, where we have our quilts stored and sell from here. And I'm the manager of the collective. My job here is to, you know, sell the work here. And so I try to do my best, and I try to have it looking a little decent enough for people to want to come back again. So we do have bus loads of people, you know, do come from Birmingham, Alabama, and not just Birmingham. We done had people from Hawaii. We done had some from Australia. I mean, the United Kingdom. And they come, they say they, you know, they love to get something to take back with them, and everybody love our work. I was told that it started back in 2002. And this is how I was told this got started. Bill ARNETT saw this quilt in a book. Somebody had taken this photograph of Annie Mae Young, her great-granddaughter, standing by a wood pile with a quilt spread over it. And when he saw that quilt, he said, I need to find a lady that made this quilt.
The ARNETTs went to Gee'S Bend and found these incredibly art-like objects that looked like modern art, and they realized that they could collect them, which they did, and had a show of them in Houston, and the rest is history. And I was unable to get to Houston to see that show, but the next year they were in the Corcoran Gallery in Washington, D.C. And my wife and I went to the Corcoran for the weekend. A bunch of the women from Gee'S Bend were there, and they did a gospel brunch. It was one of the most beautiful things that I'd ever heard. I loved the show. This was my kind of thing. A lot of improvisation, freedom from rigidity. Was what I loved most about them. Maybe most quilts are made of blocks, and you would assemble the quilt by putting the blocks together in a grid. Many of the Gee'S Bend quilts are one large design.
I use old jeans, khakis, all those stuff like that. I put it in my quilts. I don't throw it away. When the men go to the field and work with the pants and things on, they're gonna wear it in the front. But the back is always good enough for you to take the back and make a quilt out. Since we've been famous, most everybody now wants the old-fashioned quilts, like my mother and my grandmother and my auntie made. Fancy quilts don't sell now. Because I had a couple of fancy quilts. When no one looked at those, they was too fancy.
Because it doesn't look like a Gee'S Bend quilt. So I believe that it's sort of narrowed the idea of what the women can do. And people have gotten the idea, these women, they make these kind of quilts because they have limited abilities. It's totally not true. Now, these women have great abilities.